I'm going to do a couple more things because this kind of resonates with what we've been talking about. And I came across this article, and this article scared me a lot. And this article was pointing out from a gentleman who was a Russian defector. And he did an interview back in 1984, and they were going back to this interview on basically what Russia's plans are to attack the United States without doing it militarily. And the way they were going to do it was through psychological warfare. And there were specific plans on what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. I want to read some of the things in this article that I highlighted. There's a few pages here. I didn't highlight everything, but it is interesting stuff. Take a listen to this. Tell me if it's something that scares you too, because this frightens me. And, if there's anything that you wanted to add. But back in 1954, early in the Cold War, the Soviet Union created the Committee for State Security, more commonly known in the West as the KGB. The group came to oversee the Soviet Union's internal security, secret police, and domestic and foreign intelligence operations. Across the world, the KGB did whatever it could to thwart pro-Western and anti-Soviet political movements and figures. Unclear were the group's long-term plans involving the U.S. One glimpse, however, came from a former KGB agent named Yuri Bezmenov, who defected to Canada in 1970. He claimed to know details of a Soviet plan to undermine the U.S., not on the battlefield, but in the psyche of the American public. So, he claimed to know this stuff, but either the guy's a genius to have come up with this himself and he was lying about it, or this is true. I'm going to surmise that this guy did know exactly what these plans were, and then he laid these out in this interview. But he defined what was called ideological subversion. And what that was is basically to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their community, and their country. Bezmenov describes this process as a great brainwashing that has 4 basic stages. The first stage is called demoralization. And according to the former KGB agent, that is the minimum number of years, it takes 15 to 20 years to achieve. And that is the minimum number of years it is to re-educate one generation of students that is normally exposed to the ideology of its country. In other words, the time it takes to change what people are thinking. Referring to such people, they are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. He was alluding to the Pavlov's dog theory that, the dog does whatever it hears. When it hears something, it reacts to that sound or whatever the case is. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception of the logic and the logic of behavior. Demoralization is a process that is irreversible. Bezmenov described the state of a demoralized person this way. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore, as I've said numerous times in this podcast tonight. A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him a concentration camp, he still will refuse to believe it. And until he receives a kick in his fan bottom, as he says, when a military boot crashes his balls, and then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragedy of demoralization, or the situation of demoralization. Finally, a few other things just to wrap this up. Once demoralization is completed, the second stage of ideological brainwashing is destabilization. During this 2 to 5 year period, what matters is the targeting of essential structural elements of a nation: economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. Basically, the subverter, Russia in that case, would look to destabilize every one of those areas in the United States, considerably weakening it. The third stage would be crisis. It would take only up to about 6 weeks to send a country into crisis. This crisis would bring a violent change of power, structure, and economy, and would be followed by the last stage, which is the scariest one of them all. And I've talked about this before a lot, and I've discussed this before on the show, and that is normalization. And that's when your country is basically taken over, living under a brand new ideology and a brand new reality.